Have you ever asked yourself what would actually happen if, tomorrow, no one on Earth went to work? Not one person. Not the pilots. Not the doctors. Not the delivery drivers. Not the person who keeps the water running under your city. It sounds like a simple thought experiment, but the real answer is far stranger than you think. Because the world you live in is not built to survive even 24 hours of silence. You probably think of work as something personal. A job, a paycheck, a thing you complain about on Sunday nights. But work is not really personal. It is a web, a thin, invisible structure holding up everything you touch, eat, and breathe. And most people never notice it until it stops. So what actually happens? Let's walk through it, hour by hour. At midnight, almost nothing changes. The world is already used to running on autopilot overnight. Factories hum along on automated lines. Servers keep serving. But even here, cracks begin to show. Because automation was never fully independent. Somewhere, a human is supposed to be watching, fixing, restocking, rebooting, and tonight, no one is. By 3 in the morning, hospitals start to feel it. Not because doctors vanish from the building. They are still there, physically. But the economist John Maynard Keynes once imagined a future where work would shrink dramatically, where technology would free humans from labor almost entirely. He wrote about this in 1930 in an essay called Economic Possibilities for Our Grandchildren. He believed a 15-hour work week was coming. He was wrong about the timeline. But he understood something true. Systems assume continuous human effort. Remove that effort, even briefly, and the assumption breaks. Because a hospital does not run on doctors alone. It runs on the person who orders oxygen tanks, the person who processes lab results, the person who answers the phone when a nurse calls for backup. If all of them stay home, even for one day, the hospital does not stop existing. But it stops functioning the way you expect it to. Now think about food. You do not grow what you eat. Almost nobody around you does. Your food traveled through dozens of invisible hands to reach your kitchen. Farmers, truck drivers, warehouse workers, cashiers. Take away just one day of that chain, and shelves do not empty immediately. But the chain pauses. And chains that pause do not always restart smoothly. Here is something you rarely think about. Money itself needs work to move. Banks need employees to process transactions. Even digital payments rely on systems that people maintain, monitor, and repair. The economist Juliet Schor spent years studying how deeply modern life is tied to labor hours, in her research later published as The Overworked American. She found that even small disruptions in labor rhythms ripple outward, affecting far more than the workers themselves. One missing shift can delay a shipment. One delayed shipment can empty a shelf. One empty shelf can shift how thousands of people behave that same afternoon. By late morning, the silence becomes louder than the noise ever was. Airports sit still, not because planes cannot fly without pilots physically present, but because every layer around flight, security, fueling, air traffic control, ground crews, depends on human coordination. Remove any single layer, and the entire system freezes, not crashes. Freezes, waiting for someone to come back and restart it. You might assume the digital world would be fine. After all, the internet runs on machines, not people. But ask yourself this. Who fixes a server when it overheats? Who answers when a data center loses power? The internet feels invisible and automatic. It is neither. It is one of the most human-dependent systems on the planet, hidden behind a screen that makes you forget that fact. Now here is where it gets strange. Because history has actually tested a version of this. Not the entire world, but pieces of it. In 1926, workers across Britain walked off the job in what became known as the General Strike. Millions stopped working simultaneously in support of coal miners facing wage cuts. It lasted just 9 days. But within that short window, transportation collapsed. Newspapers stopped printing. Goods stopped moving. The government scrambled to maintain even basic services using volunteers who had no experience doing the jobs they suddenly found themselves doing. 9 days. That is all it took to expose how fragile the system really was. Now scale that same idea to a single day, but everywhere at once. Every country, every industry, every job, from surgeon to sanitation worker. The disruption would not be evenly spread. Some places would barely notice. Others would spiral almost immediately. Consider a more recent, gentler experiment. Between 2015 and 2019, Iceland ran a series of trials shortening the workweek without cutting pay, studied in detail by researcher Gudmundur D. Haraldsson alongside the UK think tank Autonomy. The results showed something surprising. Productivity did not collapse. In many cases, it stayed the same or even improved. Workers reported better well-being, and businesses adapted their schedules to compensate. That study was about slightly reducing work, not eliminating it entirely for a full day everywhere on Earth. But it revealed something important. Human systems can bend. They are more flexible than people assume. Just not infinitely flexible. Not all at once. Not everywhere simultaneously. Because there is a difference between a planned pause and an unplanned one. If every person on the planet knew in advance that no one would work tomorrow, systems could prepare. Hospitals could stockpile supplies. Flights could be grounded ahead of time. Food distribution could be adjusted. The disruption would still be real, but it would be survivable, manageable, almost like a global holiday. But if the stoppage happened suddenly, without warning, the outcome would look very different. Planes already in the sky would still need to land. Patients already in surgery would still need care. Systems mid-process do not pause gracefully. They break mid-motion. And broken systems take far longer to repair than they took to build. By evening, you would likely notice something emotional happening too. Not just logistical. Because work is not only a mechanism, it is also identity. Ask someone what they do, and they usually answer with their job. Take away work for a day, and many people would not know what to do with themselves. Psychologists have long noted that structured time, the kind imposed by jobs and schedules, actually supports mental stability for a large portion of the population. Remove that structure suddenly, and boredom is not the only outcome. Anxiety often creeps in too. The unsettling feeling of a world that has gone quiet in a way it was never designed to be quiet. And yet, there is another side to this, a smaller, quieter one, easy to miss. Because for one day, the sky above major cities would clear slightly as fewer vehicles moved and fewer factories ran. Noise levels would drop. Families who never share a weekday together suddenly would. There is something almost peaceful in imagining a planet that briefly stops proving its own productivity to itself. You are so used to work being the invisible engine behind your life that you rarely question what it actually holds together. Not just paychecks and profits. Trust, coordination, millions of tiny agreements between strangers who never meet, all somehow keeping food on shelves and lights on in hospitals and planes in the sky. Work, in this light, is less about jobs and more about promise. A promise that someone, somewhere, will show up. So ask yourself that question one more time. What would actually happen if no one went to work tomorrow? Only now you know the real answer. Not freedom, not rest. A reminder of just how many invisible hands hold your ordinary day together every single time you never notice them at all.